On a sun-drenched morning in the Caribbean, a seasoned oceanographer named Tom embarked on a yacht excursion with his beloved family, his wife Julia, their daughter Cassie, and their son Ben. As Tom and Ben immersed themselves in their fishing endeavors, and Cassie remained engrossed in her electronic device, Julia decided to take a solitary swim. The tranquil waters suddenly filled her with an inexplicable unease. Despite the ocean's seemingly peaceful surface, Julia experienced an overwhelming sensation of impending danger, as if some massive creature lurked nearby, circling ominously. Simultaneously, the yacht's instrumentation began displaying erratic readings, though Tom, engrossed in his fishing pursuit, failed to notice these warning signs. Julia's situation rapidly deteriorated as she found herself struggling against mysterious currents, her desperate cries initially lost to the vastness of the sea. It wasn't until her predicament became dire that Tom finally perceived her distressed calls, promptly rushing to the helm and navigating toward his distant wife. With their children's assistance, Tom plunged into the water and successfully retrieved Julia, administering life-saving care once aboard. Although irritated by Julia's failure to follow their standard swimming protocols, Tom's anger dissipated quickly as the family turned their attention to celebrating Ben's milestone 13th birthday. The joyous occasion featured a candlelit cake, presents, and Cassie capturing the moment with a family photograph. Their celebration was interrupted by a call from Cassie's boyfriend, who inquired about their swimming experience before an abrupt storm materialized in his vicinity. Despite his reassurances of safety, the connection terminated unexpectedly. As Cassie shared news of the mainland storm with her parents, the yacht began experiencing mysterious impacts. Upon investigation, they discovered an alarming sight: numerous whale carcasses surfacing around their vessel. Tom attempted to explain this unusual phenomenon as storm-induced disorientation among the marine mammals, but the situation worsened as the creatures began actively pushing against the yacht. In an effort to assess the damage, Tom ventured into the water, only to return with a significant injury from an unfortunate encounter with the propeller. While Julia tended to his shoulder wound with careful stitches, Tom revealed his concerning discovery. The yacht's shafts appeared damaged, likely from a powerful collision with a whale's tail. Poor Cassie tries desperately to reach anyone, on her phone, but it's no use. The radio sits silent too, offering nothing but static and deepening their sense of isolation. But fate isn't finished with them yet. Strange, haunting sounds pierce the air, drawing them onto the deck where an absolutely incredible sight awaits. Glowing objects streak across the night sky. Tom, brave soul that he is, springs into action, firing up the engine and executing some impressive evasive maneuvers to dodge what appears to be... Wait, are those meteorites? The engine sputters its last protest, and as the next object whooshes past terrifyingly close, they make a shocking discovery. These aren't meteorites at all, but Earth's own satellites plummeting from orbit. The wind picks up with frightening intensity, and every instrument goes completely bonkers. Huddled inside their wildly pitching yacht, the terrified family dons life jackets, preparing for the absolute worst. Then comes the strangest part yet, a mysterious ringing that sets their teeth on edge and makes them all queasy. Poor Tom tries valiantly to launch emergency flares, but it's like shouting into a hurricane. Somehow, they survive that nightmare of a night. But morning brings no relief, only more mysteries. Their yacht now sports a massive hole in its side, though mysteriously stays afloat, and when they venture outside, BUM! The most mind-bending sight yet. Their boat perches precariously on rocky ground, surrounded not by endless ocean but by a vast, desolate desert. The sea has simply vanished. Tom, trying to keep it together for his family's sake, insists there must be other survivors out there. But his scientific mind can't ignore the evidence. Compass readings gone haywire, suggesting something catastrophic. The Earth's magnetic poles have actually shifted. While this has happened before in Earth's ancient history, the implications are devastating. The seas have rushed to fill former landmasses, likely claiming most of humanity with them. This revelation hits poor Cassie hard. She retreats to the cabin, overwhelmed by grief. While Julia catalogs their dwindling supplies, young Ben refuses to give up hope, releasing colorful balloons into the strange new sky as a signal to any survivors. And then, just when all seems truly lost, Tom's constant radio calls finally get a response. Someone named NATO, captain of a submersible, is actually out there. Could this be the lifeline they've been praying for? NATO's crew had been safely cocooned in the ocean's depths when disaster struck. But don't get too excited, their survival comes with a catch. Every communication system is on the fritz and hoping for widespread rescue efforts. That's just wishful thinking. NATO drops another bombshell. According to his calculations, they've got about a week before the seas come roaring back with a vengeance. His urgent advice? Head for the hills and fast. Julia springs into action, getting Cassie and Ben packing, while Tom has a heart-wrenching private chat with NATO. They set up a rendezvous point, with Tom confidently mapping out a 2-day journey to get there. Just when they're about to set off the next morning, fate throws another curveball. Tom spots a stranger with a dog approaching the yacht. Being the good-hearted soul he is, Tom offers the injured traveler some water. But this act of kindness turns deadly in the blink of an eye. The stranger sucker punches Tom and follows up with something far worse, a makeshift spear to the chest. Julia watches in horror as her husband falls, the stranger's dog keeping her at bay. With her heart breaking but survival instincts kicking in, she makes a desperate dash for the yacht, though not before the attacker wounds her arm. The children, hearing their mother's terrified screams, rush to help. Together, they manage to barricade themselves in the cabin, but Julia knows it won't hold forever. Quick thinking leads her to hide Cassie and Ben in a locker, pressing the flare gun into her daughter's hands with strict instructions, only as a last resort. The killer, driven by desperation and hunger, eventually breaks through. Julia takes refuge in the bathroom, hastily bandaging her wound while the intruder ransacks the galley. As he methodically searches the yacht, Julia arms herself with a kitchen knife, ready to defend her family. In a clever move, she creates a diversion by jumping overboard and hiding beneath the yacht. But just when she thinks she's safe, the dog attacks. She's forced to kill it in self-defense, but the yelp gives away her position. As the killer discovers his dead companion, Julia makes her stealthy return to the yacht through the porthole, her heart pounding with each movement. The stakes couldn't be higher, her children's lives hang in the balance, and she's their only hope for survival. The moment Julia slips through the porthole, her heart freezes. She's walked right into her worst nightmare. The killer's rough hands seize her, unleashing a brutal assault before pinning her to a couch, his fingers crushing her throat. Up in her hiding spot, Cassie watches in pure terror as her mother struggles for breath. Time seems to stop as she remembers her mother's words about last resort. This is it. With trembling hands, she pushes open the locker door and squeezes the flare gun's trigger. Boom! The shot sends the attacker flying, but creates a new deadly threat. The flare ignites the yacht's interior. Flames begin dancing across the walls as Julia, gasping for air, shouts for her children to run. She makes a desperate dash for the galley, but the killer isn't finished. Though wounded, he lunges at her again. Julia summons her remaining strength, lands a powerful kick, grabs their precious supply bags, and leaps into the desert air. What awaits them below shatters their world all over again. There lies Tom, their beloved husband and father, motionless on the rocky ground. Cassie collapses beside him, heart-wrenching sobs echoing across the empty landscape. Julia presses one final tender kiss to her husband's forehead, tears streaming down her face. But there's no time for proper goodbyes. The killer emerges from the inferno above them like a demon from hell. Julia grabs her grief-stricken children and runs for their lives as their yacht erupts in a massive fireball behind them, the explosion echoing across the barren seabed. Their feet pound against the stone desert as they flee, finally finding refuge in a rocky canyon. But its waters are hopelessly salty, completely undrinkable. Sweet Cassie tries to share their dwindling water supply with Ben, but he pushes it away, his young face twisted with guilt. In his heart, he's carrying a terrible burden. Those cheerful balloons he released with such hope have become a beacon of destruction, leading that murderous stranger straight to their family. But before she can fully comfort her children, her blood runs cold. There he is again. Their relentless pursuer, a dark speck on the horizon, still hunting them. Their exhausted legs find new energy born of fear as they push forward into the evening shadows. Suddenly, Ben stumbles upon something extraordinary, a massive hammerhead shark. He tries to salvage something useful from the creature, but Julia's watchful eyes catch their stalker's approaching figure. Run! The word tears from her throat. They encounter a nightmarish sight, a field of corroded barrels, their toxic contents now exposed to the open air. Julia's heart pounds at the choice before her, risk the contamination or face their murderous pursuer. With death closing in behind them, she makes the gut-wrenching decision to press forward through this chemical graveyard, urging her precious children between the hazardous containers. The former ocean floor has become a museum of humanity's worst habits. Mountains of plastic waste and discarded debris create a treacherous maze through which they weave. But nature doesn't care about their desperate situation. Dehydration begins taking its merciless toll on young Ben. Julia's hands shake as she gives him their very last drops of precious water, knowing it's nowhere near enough. The horror of their situation finally breaks through Cassie's brave facade. She crumples, her voice cracking with despair as she voices what they're all thinking. They're fighting a losing battle against impossible odds. But Julia, summoning strength she didn't know she had, infuses her voice with unwavering authority. We keep moving. Providence leads them to an eerie sanctuary, the weathered fuselage of a long-sunken aircraft now exposed on the barren seabed. As they huddle inside this metal tomb, Julia pulls out their last family photo, her fingers trembling as she traces Tom's smiling face. Her voice grows soft as she shares a precious memory with her children, their parents' unlikely love story that began in a hospital room where a young Tom lay recovering from decompression sickness after a diving mishap. The story opens a floodgate of emotions, and the children finally allow themselves to properly mourn their father, their quiet sobs echoing in the hollow aircraft. But fate isn't finished with them yet. In the dead of night, Cassie deliberately ventures outside, playing a dangerous game of bait and prey. The killer emerges from the darkness, completely oblivious to the trap. Just as his hands reach for Cassie, Julia strikes like a protective lioness, her knife finding its mark. Their victory, however, turns ominous by dawn. Something has ravaged the killer's corpse, suggesting an even deadlier presence lurking in this wasteland. Desperation drives them forward until Ben, overcome by thirst, suddenly bolts toward a deceptive puddle. Julia's warnings come too late. He manages several gulps of briny water before she yanks him away, but the damage is done. As sickness overtakes him, they cobble together a makeshift shelter from abandoned beach chairs. Their brief respite shatters when Julia hears something that turns her blood to ice. The sight that greets her sends them running in blind panic. A massive cargo ship looms ahead, surrounded by scattered containers and a handful of survivors. Julia's cries for help turn to horror as she watches these people retreat into a container, slamming the doors shut. They've spotted what's coming. Thousands of monstrous crabs emerge like something from a nightmare. The family barely scrambles onto a container top, though one of the creatures manages to sink its claws into Julia's leg. From their perch, they witness a gruesome spectacle. The crabs breach the container's defenses, overwhelming those inside despite their desperate resistance. The blood loss from her wound pulls Julia into unconsciousness, her last thoughts with her children. When she finally awakens, alone under the burning sun, panic grips her heart until she discovers her brave kids have ventured down to scavenge for supplies. While Julia cauterizes her wound, fighting back screams of pain, Ben examines their newfound weapons. Their grim search through the containers yields meager rewards, some food and water found in the pockets of the less fortunate. Each discovery serves as a stark reminder of the apocalyptic world they now inhabit, where survival demands increasingly desperate measures. Hope flickers to life when Julia discovers a radio among their scavenged supplies. When Nato's voice crackles through, his news sends chills down their spines. He too has faced the terror of deep-sea arthropods emerging from their ancient domains. The sea's imminent return has driven these prehistoric nightmares to the surface. Julia's voice breaks as she begs him to save her precious children, their location now uncertain without their map. Like a beacon in their darkest hour, a flare streaks across the sky. Ben's sharp eyes catch its direction, and they race toward salvation. The yellow submarine appears like a mirage in the distance, but the treacherous seabed terrain stands between them and safety. Cassie bristles at her mother's singular focus on the children's survival, but Julia pushes forward relentlessly, her silence speaking volumes. Their path forces them through a toxic canyon, where disaster strikes. A sudden rockslide tears the family apart. Julia, trapped behind the fallen rocks, makes the most heart-wrenching decision of her life. Despite Cassie's desperate protest, she commands her daughter to save Ben, her pleas finally breaking through Cassie's resistance. The children emerge from the canyon's death trap, reaching the submarine only to find it eerily empty. Then Nato appears, his body bearing witness to the horrors he's endured. With his dying breath, he urges them aboard, but Cassie's heart won't let her abandon her mother. She races back to find Julia in an epic standoff against the approaching crab swarm, her ammunition nearly spent. In a moment of pure cinematic tension, Cassie scales the rock barrier, extending her hand to her mother in a desperate bid for survival. They barely make it to the submarine as the crabs claim Nato, his sacrifice ensuring their escape. But nature has one final spectacle in store. A massive wave appears on the horizon, a wall of returning ocean that lifts their vessel like a toy. As they're dragged across the rocky wasteland, Julia's consciousness fades, her mind replaying their incredible journey of survival. When she finally comes to, an eerie stillness surrounds them. Opening the hatch reveals their new reality. They've been deposited in the ruins of a once great city, survivors of an apocalyptic transformation that has forever changed their world. The story ends on a bittersweet note. While this tale of survival against impossible odds had all the makings of an epic disaster film, something was lost in its execution. Despite its ambitious concept and heart-pounding premise, the creator's missteps prevented it from achieving its full potential as a cinematic masterpiece.